Hey everybody, welcome back to another coalition deep dive, or in this case, nation deep dive, since we've covered West Germany and Eurocore already, so we don't have to do the Dutch-German coalition. But you know how it goes, right? Gotta do some war gamels, man. Gotta do the war gamels. It's Saturday today, so let's go to start with Thursday. Yep, there we go. Alright. And you know what? Today, because we're doing Dutch, let's go for the Dutch Leopard too. Alright. Bad optics, not poor, bad optics. Poor stealth. Probably medium. Okay, not full HP. That makes me think it's a supply helo. No, it can't be a supply helo given the speed. Supply truck? Yes. Supply truck that is not in mech or armored. So here's the thing. I'm pretty sure supply trucks are always in mech and armored. Maybe with the exception of something like the Alvas. You know, the British amphibious supply truck. But other than that, they should pretty much always be in mech and armored. An exception could be like a South African supply truck. Since but I think stuff like that still gets, like tanks and such are still available in mech, so I don't think it's that. Oh, this is very interesting. And it can't be a supply helo given the speed, right? So there has to be a ground unit. So maybe it's like a 5 HP, like a MLRS truck, sorry, Jeep, you know? Like a Rover 107. Oh, we are right on the money. Okay, but how many are there? What else is there? It is an MLRS. Are they BM24s? Are they 5 HP? Let's see. I'll be honest, it doesn't tell me much. I don't think they're that fast though. But more expensive than 4. Okay. It's not a BM24. Yeah, I expected them to be slower. Okay, what else is there? Plowman is the Plowman 5. I think the Plowman might actually be 10 HP. It's not entirely consistent what Eugen does with the HP on some wheeled stuff. But let's still go for the Plowman. The Plowman is 5 HP. The Plowman is 95 kmh. Also, I should have looked at it here. Older than 65. The Plowman is definitely not older than 65. Older than 65 MLRS. That isn't the BM24. And still pretty fast. Now I'm confused. Could it be the Lars? The Lars isn't that old, man. It's not that old, is it? Plus the Lars 1 is like 50 points. Lars 2 would be 70. Lars 2 can't be that old, can it? The Koryong exists. That is the South Korean MLRS. Which is in like the 70-point price range. But surely that can't be that old either. Yugoslavia has some more, but it's obviously not Yugoslavia. We also have Italy. It's not Italy. It is around 70 points. Article. It's not that. Is it? It can't. Surely it's not the last. Not the last. Last is pretty old, not that old. I mean, at this point, I'm just guessing. Valkyrie is not a wheel one. No, we don't. We already know it's not South Africa. We also okay. Can't be US. Wait. We also haven't got a single coalition. Poland? BM20. Wait, hold on. BM21. Oh my god, is it just a BM21? Oh my god, it's just a beam. I was thinking of the BM21 right at the start. But for some reason in my head, I was like, no, that's 10 HP. No, every single thing is 5 HP. Why do I think they're 10 HP? Oh, this is just bad, man. Alright. Let's do better this time around. It is around 5 HP, so it's 4 or 6 HP, so it's a helicopter. It has to be a helicopter, right? There's nothing else with 4 or 6 HP other than helicopters, is there? With a maximum of 2 weapons, at least medium optics, which means it can't really be a transport. It's almost certainly because transports would have poor optics, right? I don't know. There might be 1 or 2 transports, but I don't remember there ever being a helicopter transport with medium optics. Maybe the Polish Sokol. The transport Sokol might have medium optics because the AA variant does as well, but I'm not certain. I'm just leaning towards like an MI2 or something. Let's check MI2. It's just, but yeah, okay. It's a Riken healer. It is not quite as fast, or not well. Let's just start the MI1. 62 is correct. MI1 is actually smaller. Interesting. Oh boy, this is gonna be like a. Is the bow 105? I think the bow 105 is 220 kmh. 205 is not very fast. It's also more expensive. More expensive with the same HP, similar speed, and no weaponry. Why is it more expensive? Let's try the bow. 10. How is it written? 105. This thing here. Yeah, it's 240. Oh. Okay, I must be missing something here. Oh my god, it's not a Riken helicopter. It's a logistics. It's a helicopter CV. Oh my god, it's just so. Brother, look at the tab, man. Look at the tab. All right. Wait, hold on. Probably like a bell. Bell is too fast, actually. I mean, there's a chance that one of those commands MI2s might have a slightly different speed. What other command healers are there with, like the UH1s, like this? Given the name, I'm gonna say this is a. Okay, it's not the South Korean one. I spotted another one. This thing here. Okay, it's that thing. Oh, I'd like another blunder with the. Oh my god, stop being blind, Razzmann. Right. At least get your shit together properly now. It's US. It's newer, it's more expensive, it's faster. It has to be a plane, really. Optics kind of give it away that it's likely to be a plane. It's a marine plane as well. So, let's go for the AV with 3 weapons. AV-8B Harrier 2. Faster than 750. Oh, is this might be the Tomcat. Tomcat is relatively old as well. Oh, it's a Tomcat. Alright. I'm happy with this one. This one I did well. Why did I click on speed here? What the heck? Yeah, Tomcat I'm happy with. Alright. That was the war game for today. Now let's take a look at the Dutch units. This should be pretty fast. The Dutch don't have any not a ton of like exceptionally like wacky units to talk about. They were the first like paid DLC for Wargame, and I'm pretty sure Eugen intentionally went for like a safe choice that one was relatively cheap to produce, as in like probably like for one just spending time on coming up with what they can get. I think that was relatively easy to research, but also they could just frankly copy quite some stuff, which is fair enough. I think it has to be said, right? Red Dragon also got like a good chunk of free DLC and free content before this, right? Map packs, every nation getting an additional unit and such, right? There's another campaign, which honestly, that actually genuinely didn't have to do. Eugene has done a lot of, to put it mildly, questionable stuff. But I think up until including the Dutch DLC, they did like very little, at least from what I remember, to like anti-player base behavior. Let's put it that way. Um, Israel, the red DLCs, this, potato, potato. Either way, Laura CV is a cheap CV. It's pretty basic, this is an okay CV. 2 front armor helps a bit. It doesn't have the 2 side armor. You really want more than 1 side armor, especially against like high explosive artillery, which is like one of the biggest, or even high explosive bombers, right? One of the biggest CV killers in the game. And honestly, the thing with the YP4 raids, it doesn't matter a whole lot much with the transports, but we're gonna see it in a recon tab as well. They have horrible autonomy. Now, it's not like entirely on the same level as something like a Kiyomaru or like an M41. Well, for one, because M41 has only 200. You're wheeled and you have good off-road speed, right? So you don't notice it as much, but you still can notice it, right? It's not gonna be a huge deal for the CV, but honestly, I wouldn't recommend necessarily going for this unless you're playing something like a Moto. There's still an argument to take the Fuchs over it if you're playing DGC, though the Browning and the front armor are quite nice. It's by no means horrible, but we'll get to a better choice in a second. Basic infantry CV, although what isn't basic is that you do get the IV with it. And since you very rarely will run all 3 cards in your infantry tab, this is like a very nice combination. Just get like a decent base defense unit for your infantry CV. It's like for essentially 5 points or 10 points, because you're gonna have to pay at least 5 points anyway, right? It is tracked, and sometimes you would prefer the wheeled CVs, if you wanna get it for your secondary spawn during the opener. But besides that, this is like one of the nicest like CV infantry cards, right? Because that combination just works very, very well. Helicopter CV, well, no. That CV is pretty solid. It's 5 points cheaper than like the M577, which also has 2 front and 2 side. And you also get a Browning, which is really nice. Do not underestimate how useful Brownings can be. Now, to be fair, sometimes CMG can also give your position away, which in some situations it might not have, but most of the time there's something around and you can shoot at it from a kilometer away. You're likely to be spotted already anyway. And sometimes it's not a huge deal, right? Don't get me wrong. But every now and then a Browning can make a difference. And you do notice a difference between a Browning and like a basic 7.62mm MG. Level 1 CV, it's alright. It's affordable enough in 4 per card in Holland. It's among the more lighter tank CVs, but has decent speed at least. It does have one of the only 3, I think, tracked supply vehicles. This does make it a lot more survivable against artillery, of course. And honestly, it's not really that much slower than wheeled 10-point trucks, because they have horrible off-road speed and horrible forests penalties, which this thing, I believe, does not. But honestly, I'm sorry for that. But honestly, I never double-checked that. Now, for example, right? If we take a look at the M35 truck and compare that to a Fuchs, I can't give you exact numbers, I'll be honest, right? But one way to find out whether it belongs, let's say, to the category of units that get horrible off-road speed penalty is to check a unit moving type. If I remember correctly, that is if you're in a certain category, like that category determines like your off-road speed penalties, right? It's a percentage. It's like essentially just like a multiplier, like below 1, obviously, right? For example, the Fuchs has 7, this has 2. I don't think the value is itself matters, right? It doesn't matter if it's like 7 is bigger than 2 does it's better. I think this is literally just like essentially a category, right? Everything in category 2 gets X multiplier, so to speak, right? Now let's just check the PTT transport moving type 5 and compare it with the PRVR moving type 8. Alright, you know what? Let's test this out, alright? Alright, we're in game. We have the PRVR and the Dutch MX transport, and I've also selected this thing here, right? 5-point truck that had the same moving type as the supply trucks, right? And in NACAF 106, it is 5 kmh faster, but it does have, what's the thing called? The DEF. Yeah, moving type 2, and the NACAF has moving type 3, right? Now, let's just, it is 5 kmh faster to be fair. Let's give this thing a little head start, right? 2 bullet time, and just right click them there. And look at how much faster this is, right? Alright. And you know what? We're even gonna unload this. So it's lighter. Alright, let's try this again. This is not a 5 kmh difference, right? Look how much faster it is. These things just get huge off-road speed penalties, which is why, in practice, I think they're much slower than you might think they are. Let's say you... 450 kmh off-road speed isn't that far, but let's say you need to supply infantry CV here or something. It has to get, like, through the forest patch here. You want to resupply back there, you need to get through here. Every little bit of force is gonna add up, right? And pathfinding isn't always great, especially on something like Plunging Valley if you're starting on the bad side. Sometimes, you know, let's say you want to fast move from here to there. This thing would be much faster if it took this road and that thing, but it's probably gonna travel like this and then through here. And because you obviously can't micromanage everything, it's gonna be actually, in practice, much slower than a tracked supply truck. Now, still, even with this available, I would prefer 20-point trucks, but in Holland we have this and 15-point. I probably would go for the 15-point. Now for this test. Oh, you know what? This one is an amphibious. That's why they have different moving types. Probably. Alright, let's give this a shot. Just gave this left one a little bit of a head start. But okay, they're basically moving at the same speed. So this thing gets the exact same off-road speed penalties as tracked APCs, right? There you go. Science, bitch! Now back to nerding around about units. Alright, that's logistics done. Infantry. Engineer combat. Basic flamers. The bad part is they don't get the good 5-pointers or the IVs. Both this thing and this thing, as well as the AMX-13, right? I mean, this would already be a very good 5-point transport. This one is just better. Although now, with Italy, they get a slight availability penalty, so there's actually a reason to take this now. Either way, the genies don't get it, which is very unfortunate. Although you at least get the wheeled option, which has 2 front armor, which is nice, I guess, but I think you would really like to have the good 5-pointer as well for certain decks like Armored. Although, to be fair, neither Mech nor Armored necessarily need those, and usually those are the decks that you, especially Mech, in Mech decks where you don't get shock squads, is one of the decks where you really run them, but you have such good shock infantry, to which we'll get in a second, that in almost, unless you're playing 80s or 85 where you don't get Storts or Comrade 95, pretty much every deck already has access to good shock or elites. That genies aren't that necessary, or like you see them even less than you usually see flamers. Flamers, I think, by the way, while you don't see them very often, are in a fine place. They're just niche, and certain decks really want them. Many decks don't really, but that's just how it is. Grenadiers. Solid 10-point line infantry. Basic MG, fine. Battle rifle, good. Law is a solid 80 for a 10-point infantry. You get very good 5-pointer. You get a very solid 15-point IFV. Not the best out there, but by far not the worst. Probably in the upper tier of 15-point IFVs. Both 5-pointer spam and YP are like a IFV spam. Very, very good options. Corner in your base are bad. Like for 35 points, I mean, okay, yes, they will win 1-on-1 against pretty much any line or shock squad. But so will the 95s for the same price. but base, they have mediocre anti-tank capabilities given the cost, and FAL battle rifle not good on elite infantry because you already cap out on accuracy very early on, which you don't want. FALO not a good MG, I guess if that's what you want to call it either. Okay, I want to look this up. What the heck is the FALO? FALO rifle. FNFALO. Origin Belgium. Light machine gun. Oh, it is actually a machine gun. Is to provide a squad with automatic rifle fire capability while being more portable than a medium machine gun. Whereas the regular FAL battle rifle was designated a lightweight automatic rifle, the FALO was a heavyweight counterpart. Alright, fair enough, I guess. Common Year 95, on the other hand, are just amazing. Like, I was gonna say something along the lines of, in my opinion, like better than Fallschirmjäger 90. It's of course a bit of a case by case basis, right? Fallschirmjäger 90 have the better AT, right? Panzerfaust 3 is amazing. Fallschirmjäger have the best primary weapon in the game, and a slightly worse MG. Mini-Me is the best. MG3 is basically the second best though, and pretty close, right? On elites, the MG matters less, so the difference isn't huge. However, Commander Near 95 still have a top tier primary weapon, essentially like the second best for elites, I believe. I'd say they're better than SMGs, but you could maybe still make an argument that SMGs are better because elite infantry are also often used in CQC. So still a top tier primary weapon, best MG, and a fine anti-tank weapon. It's by no means amazing, but they're also 15 HP, and that is a huge deal for their survivability, right? Unlike tanks that have armor or planes that have ECM, infantry doesn't have that. Infantry will, no matter what infantry you have, right, they will always take the same amount of damage from fire support, right? That much is, I think, obvious. But that also means that a Corpsman Near 95 or like a 10 HP elite infantry squad will die just as fast to rocket bots or tanks as 10 HP regular or like reservists, right? So the only thing that for survivability is HP and to a certain extent speed. And the extra HP is really noticeable on elite infantry. It allows you to not only win more fights, to like come out alive out of fights, but also with for one more HP. So if you take a little bit of extra damage from somewhere else, you have a high chance to survive. But obviously, it just means you will get out alive of more fights and allow you to repair them up. Online or regular or reservists, you don't really care that much about it. You still kind of do, but not nearly as much, especially when they're meant to be meat shields. On elite infantry, you really, really do. And they have worse anti-infantry capabilities than Fallschirmjäger 90, like when it comes to raw DPS. But the DPS is still so high that they will demolish everything else, and the 5 HP matters so much more than the extra DPS. However, of course, it doesn't mean they're inherently better. It kind of depends on what you want or what you want your elite infantry to do. Because Fallschirmjäger 90 obviously have the Panzerfaust 3. If you're playing DGC Motor, for example, and you don't get Panzergrenadiere 90, Fallschirmjäger 90 are the only option for you to get Panzerfaust 3s. Now, to be fair, you also have 7 slots in that infantry tab, so you're probably gonna take both anyway. But in the unspec, I probably more often take Komarinia 95 than Fallschirmjäger 90. Because you already have the Panzergren 90s. And the Komarinia 95 will do a much, much better job when it comes to town grinding and such. But, and I've said that before, and like half a year ago, and I vividly remember this now. I don't think it's like a huge deal either way. It also depends on your playstyle, what you go up against, what map, etc., right? But in an average ranked deck, I would put in Komarinia 95, but at the same time, I don't think it's like a huge difference necessarily. Natris, one of the best reservists in the game because they have one of the best 5-pointers in the game. 3 armor, front armor to side armor, fast, Browning, what more do you want? Stinger A, they're fine. Not the best man pets, but good man pets. Sotoreben base, similar story to Komarina base, just actually quite bad for the cost. I mean, Carl Gustav is fine for 20 points, but you expect a bit more out of your squad, and a basic MG, and while Battle Rifle is good, basic MG is just not cutting it. Transports are fine, but having this IFV on a 20-point squad is not nearly as impactful on it as it is on a 10-point squad. So yeah. The 95 variant, on the other hand, is S tier, one of the best shock squads in the game. Only really lose out to Commandos 90. They might lose out to like I mean, okay, Alpini for 20 points, or the 15-man shock squads for 20 points would win, of course. Don't think they lose out on Stormer. I think they win because of the Minimi. I'm not sure if the Battle Rifle makes it makes up for it. I don't think it does, but actually, I don't know. Either way, they're S tier shock squads. Unlike, Commandos or Stormer, they also have an 84, which is just better than a Kanto stuff. You get 1 more AP and twice the RPM. You lose out on 10% accuracy, and sometimes you notice that, but extra AP and the 20 RPM definitely make up for that. Unlike Commandos 90, for example, which are obviously amazing, they get a great 5-pointer and, again, the 15-point IV, which isn't amazing, but it's still a solid option. And they still get a wheel transport with 2 front armor. Now, the worst part about the squad is you don't get it in Moto. That's a huge bummer for DGC Moto. It's one of the few shock squads together with Panzer Yakari that do get wheel options, but aren't available in Moto. That's actually quite rare. Usually, your shock squads that aren't available in Moto just don't get wheel transports to begin with. Looking at Panzer Grenadiere, for example. Or their Marine squads, right? Which are always a bit special. But yeah. Wildblack and the 95 variants. I've never gotten any decent value out of them. I think if you could just turn off their HE weapon, they might actually be kind of okay. Not amazing, but kind of okay. But they waste their missiles on infantry, which they often just don't even hit and just do nothing as a result, get spotted and killed. I've never gotten any decent value out of them. Support. This thing is kind of like an M1 on an 8. Actually pretty okay. Carries good amount of ammo as well. And as always, 5 HE on a howitzer is bigger than 5 HE on a mortar. Just one, like, add it to the list of 80-point M109s. Sorry, I've said my piece about them, right? It's not like they're inherently bad, but you always have better options to revenge. M109, A5, and L. I always like I never remember like which M109 is like the best out of the 10-second aim time ones. I think it's better than the Paladin. It is actually worse than a Paladin. No, sorry, better. I was confusing shot reload with salve length. It's basically a slightly better Paladin. Well, it also has a good chunk more range. But one of the worst things about a Paladin really is the range. Doesn't come into play much, but every now and then you notice it, and then it's really annoying. But yeah, basically a better Paladin. Slightly faster rate of fire, or higher rate of fire, I should say. This is basically a base cap part, like, quite literally. Don't look at the availability here. I'm currently running on accident the modded version of Wargame with the tournament patch, which I think the only thing that it changes for Dutch Germany is the cheetah availability to put it in line with the German Gepard base. The German base Gepard, while this being a copy of the German base Gepard, it actually has slightly worse availability. And the A1, which is not a copy of the Gepard A1, it's basically a Gepard A2 without stabilizer and without a stinger, right? Because the Gepard A1 has 55% accuracy and 35% stabilizer, I think. While this thing, for the same price, has no stabilizer, but it gets 10% extra accuracy. I think the Gepard A1 is still better because the stabilizer can be really nice, but 65% accuracy is a lot. And if you've ever faced up against the Gepard A2, even without the stingers, you do notice the extra accuracy over others, or 55% or 45% on the other Gepards, right? So honestly, there's an argument to be made, I think, for this to be actually be the best Gepard in the game to an extent, because the A2 also is only like 4 per card availability, which is not so great. I think this is actually very, very good, but the lack of stabilizer can also be very annoying. So I can also understand why you would definitely make the argument to be like 55 points without a stamp. What are you doing? La Remortière. I don't know why I said it in a French voice. It's fun, honestly. I like 2AG mortars. They fire so fast with such a high rate of fire. It's really fun. They have low range, but you also kind of have to use them at close range, simply because it reduces the travel time immensely, and thus actually allows you to more consistently help in ongoing firefights, right? You don't really want to blind fire with them unless you know exactly where something is, because of very low AoE. So basically, you want to use them as fire support in ongoing fights, like stationary infantry versus stationary infantry. That's where you want to use this. With its very fast aim time and burst, very low range, shots are gonna land very, very fast after you give the order. So yeah, you want to right click on infantry to make sure that the center of the uh, firing thing is always right where the infantry is. Don't fire position with this. It takes longer and it makes you more inaccurate, actually. It's fun. Not ideal for smoking because the clouds are small, and again the range. For smoking you want the range, so you don't always have to keep moving your mortar as well. 3HE mortar is pretty basic, decent ammo, and then the basic 4HE mortars, right? Usually this is honestly the best all-rounder, but 2HE ones are just so much fun. M107, probably not the best howitzer, but I love it. I say this every time. 60 points for 9HE is so much fun, and you get so many of them. I love spamming them, but it's probably not that. M110, it's a 90 point M110A2. Pretty basic. Basic Eyehawk, Hawk Pip 2, and the Heos Hawk. These days, you really see the Eos Hawk and the Heos Hawk that the Dutch get very often in the. So there was kind of like a lull of usage, I feel like. Once Denmark got the Eos Hawk, you saw it used a lot. And then I feel like for a good while, you just barely saw those around. And like over the past few years, they really started being used again. Maybe it came together with US gameplay being a lot of like A10 and Seed behind and such. Maybe that's why. I don't know. But obviously, not having the radar micro is a huge boon, right? And it's not even just about like radar micro, right? Or like being bad at radar micro. Even if you're good at radar micro, this can very much be a much stronger piece than the Hawkpip 2, because being perfect with radar micro would also mean that you're just not firing for a bit, right? Even if you never get your radar A killed by Seed, you will still be in a position where you're not gonna fire because you have it turned off, right? And such that even with, well, let me put it this way: don't let me or anyone tell you that this is only used by people who can't radar micro. It offers advantages even when you have perfect radar micro. And I probably should use it a lot more, but I don't play a ton of Scandi or DGC currently. Lance, I don't think it's that great. And honestly, these days I think it's probably best used up vetted. It's very inconsistent, at least down vetted. I've used this a couple of times, and in a recent video, I failed multiple times, I think, with this to snipe a CV, even though I knew where it was. It's really frustrating. So it's fun. It's really fun to use. Don't get me wrong, right? The fun aspect of this is very high, I think. But it's just very inconsistent, unfortunately. But maybe for the better. I think if this was a strong unit, like an actually very good unit to always take, even if you're tryharding, might be a bit like frustrating to play against. So maybe it's like in a let's say perfect state. If you wanna like get the best out of it, I do think it's probably best to upgrade it and maybe even take 2 cards. I think you want the accuracy. If you wanna get maximum fun value, take 2 cards down with it. If you want to do something in between, probably just 1 card unvetted. I think all 3 options have their own pros and cons. Yeah, very high fun value. Effectiveness, it's by no means like bad, but kinda get a bit lucky. It's also like 120 points and has a lot of downtime between shots, so if you don't get a decent value out of it in your first one or maybe even two rockets or missiles rather, it really hurts your wallet. MX-13 is amazing. It's definitely worth talking about because, in case you don't know, those 13 RPM are kind of lying. They have like a revolver or cylinder or whatever kind of semi-autoloader, at least in game. I don't know how it is in real life. Look at the salvoing 12 shot reload 3, right? Within that salvo, which is pretty long, you essentially have a 20 RPM gun, right? Which is really high. And with 3 HE, that thing is really good fire support. If it wasn't for the recon variant that the Dutch get, this would be pretty much an almost always take. Especially with the Martyr 2 price nerf in DGC. Yeah, it's a very good unit, and again, main reason why you don't see that often, I think, is because the recon variant exists. In the past, I didn't really take the recon variant that much. I think I was very much underrating it back then. Yeah. It does have some advantages over the recon variant. Obviously, one being availability. The other one being AP and range. I think accuracy as well. But really, the range is the biggest deal in that case. And Nuremberg 7, there's no reason to take this. In DGC, you have Martyr 2, and even in Holland, honestly, just this thing. Yes, it is much easier to kill, but gun is just so much better. Impact's a bigger punch, you know? Also, like, no reason to take this when you have the AMX-13, honestly. Yeah. Leopard 1V is kind of like a 1A4 with the 1A5 gun, although I think the 1A5 is 16 AP. It's okay, but also no real reason to take it because of the recon variant. 2A1, 2A4, 2A5. This is literally a West German 2A1. This is literally a West German 2A5. And this is a West German 2A4 with 2 extra AP. Obviously, both of these are fine. Nothing really outstanding. 2A4 NL, it's obviously fine. For team games, it's probably better than a West German 2A4. I think it has the same availability. No, maybe not. You know what? We can just check this here. 2A4. Yeah, it's okay. It doesn't have the same availability. For team games, it's probably better because you really want to be as close to super heavy as you can. You want as much super heavy as you want in most team games, really. In 1v1s, I might prefer the West German one, but you know, it's what, 15 points for 2 extra AP. It's not a horrible deal, but it's also 15 extra points, and the armor is still the same. It's still fine, right? Personally, I probably in the DGC take the 2A4 most decks because it's like a better like stopgap, I think, between the 2A1 and the 2A5, but I think it's also not a huge deal. Recon Tab, very strong, very strong. MX-13, again, same RPM, still 3 HE. Worst range, AP, and accuracy, but, you know, optics and stealth, and that for the same price. It's basically a must-take. It's very good. Vercanning, also kind of a must-take. One card should be enough most of the time. You're not really gonna spam this because it doesn't quite pack. It's not quite the substitute of a medium tank that like a pure PSV or even in CTQ is, in my opinion. It doesn't quite pack the same punch, and I think you notice that when you're shooting in other tanks. It's still a very, very good unit. Don't get me wrong, but it has just as SAP, right? Both the CDQ and P on PSV have 17, and I think you notice that. In some matchups, of course, the VP doesn't really matter. You're still gonna double tap just like the P on PSV or the CDQ would. But when you're going up against like heavier tanks, you really notice that you're not gonna do much. Still a very good unit though. Basic Recon Helo, Basic Recon Infantry, KCT. So okay, Elite Infantry. For the Recon Elites, you don't care too much about their primary and MG. It still matters though, right? Having the Uzi at least makes up for having just a follow, because SMGs on Elites are good, but you also get a Calculus of M2, which is very important. You don't want your Recon Infantry to have horrible infantry AT. Because there will be either sneaking around, in which case being able to one-shot anything with like a bit of armor is very important. But also when you're at the front line and you're spotting, you don't want to get flash shot by 2 5-pointers, right? Except for optics streak and whatever. This thing here is actually not horrible, not great either. I think if it was 20 points, it would be okay-ish. But 1 armor and like a very, very like low range and low accuracy autocannon does have the same rate of fire as like the Marder 1 or the PvP M80A, but they have 20% accuracy as well, you know? Also very little ammo. Yeah, 20 points in more ammo, and I think this would be okay. Now it's not like inherently horrible, you just have better options, right? Not this, but that thing, for example, which is basically like a build cut, right? KBA 25, 2 front armor, it's fine, it's solid. Usually you don't really have the space for these because you run these two and like maybe even 2 cuts of KCT and like the Riken Hilo or the Tiger in the GC, right? But this is fine. You also have a wheel variant for the same price actually. It's like a Hanshi Nana. For 5 points less, you get lower autonomy. I should also mention, I was planning to do that earlier, Dutch KBA 25 actually gets 5% less accuracy than the South Korean one. You can just never fix that. But honestly, while it probably shouldn't be the case, it gives a bit of flavor to the Dutch, even if the theory is shit, because it's just worse. And on this thing, you really notice the autonomy because it means you can't zoom around nearly as much. An exception optics variant, which exists. Vehicles, Amex Pratt. I mean, honestly, again, if this had like 2 or more tubes, meaning it wouldn't have to reload for 5 seconds after each individual missile, would maybe have a role. But like this, not so much. This thing is kind of neat. It does have a single tube, yes, but it does have 2 front armor, which means that an AMX 10 can't just rev up to you and one-shot you at max range. So that helps a lot. And ITOs are decent, and for 40 points they're affordable and decently fast, so it's okay. It's fine. Big Toe 2 variant as like half of the Blue Formations have, which they're not inherently bad, it's just they're a bit clunky, honestly. 10-point basic Reckless Rifle Jeep. Laro Ito is actually kind of nice. I do like affordable Ito carriers. Yeah. Probably would go for the P-Vent. You have 5 points more for the armor, HP, and more ammo. Kind of nice. Speed and autonomy are neat though on this thing. And then Toto variant. There's definitely an argument to take the Toto over it. And the thing with the P-Vet is, it carries so much ammo, you can also just set it and forget it, right? And it doesn't die nearly as fast as like a Laro does. Helicopter tab. Light, but some good stuff in here. Now, this isn't good, this is just bad. I'm not gonna elaborate further. This is just Apache, and you trade the rocket pods for double the Hellfires. Personally, I think I'd rather have the rocket pods. On the other hand, 16 Hellfires mean you basically don't have to care about what it shoots at. Or like you don't have to worry about it wasting missiles because it just carries a ton of them, right? So there's that. You don't see it a ton, but there is a role for it. It's fine. It's a solid. Hellfires are good, right? The autocannon is good. You're fast. You have medium optics. Speaking of fast and medium optics, this thing is amazing. One of like the best, arguably the best, just fire support helicopters in the game. It's a bit expensive, but it's very good autocannon. Good and lots of rocket pods. It has front and side armor, meaning that infantry rifles and MGs are barely going to deal damage to it. It's fast, it has 8 HP and medium optics. Can't really get much better than that. You do pay for it though, right? Like an MIT KT, which is also amazing, only costs 50 points, for example. But doesn't have a turret on the gun. Also is slower. Also doesn't have the armor, I think, right? So it's very good, but you also pay for it, right? For something that essentially only kills light armor stuff in infantry, but it also can kill a lot of it. And this thing also just exists. Like, it's not inherently bad, and if you are in a situation where you can use them at a pretty safe distance, and you have a FOB, then you can just keep rearming them and sending them out, and 30 points a pop, 24 snaps, it's not horrible. Like, Lynx H7 also has snaps, costs 35 points, and has 36 snaps, I wanna say. Lynx H7, 38 snaps. For 35 points, not including infantry, this is actually not a horrible deal, all things considered. I think I think it's kind of flying under the radar. It's by no okay, by no means game breaking or anything, right? Lynx 87 is also faster and has 6 HP, right? And honestly, this isn't like a horrible helicopter. If you run a farm, it's not bad. It's by no means bad. I honestly even underappreciated there. I say it, you know. AirTab has some decent stuff in here. F104G. F104s all have 1000 kmh since the Italy patch, which makes them somewhat worse at helo hunting. But in practice, it's not as much as that much worse than I originally anticipated. Now, this didn't come up, by the way, from the Strike team. Eugen did it on their own devices, by the way. Right? Nobody from us suggested it. Or there's any stocks, rocks thrown at us. We did fear that it's gonna like invalidate this, especially this hero hunter, right? I think this is the most used and most important F104, important in terms of like role filling. It is worse. It does make him weaker, but they're actually still fine, honestly. Because the fear was that they'd be worse at gun running and getting 2 missiles off in one run, but they still do that consistently. So honestly, I don't think it was as big of a nerf as like nerf for that role as feared. So that's solid hero hunter. Yeah, there's no real reason to take this. On the one hand, it looks like just a stronger helo hunter, but you also pay 50% extra for the same missiles, same speed, a slightly better gun. The range versus planes is irrelevant, but you get more accuracy, which helps versus helicopters, of course. More ECM and air detection, but honestly, just 50 points more is such a big deal. MLU is it's quite literally an F-16C Block 52. It's good. DGC you have the KWS, which is honestly better, but some people run 2 cards of ASFs, and that's it's a very good secondary card. As good as like the KWS is really good, right? But the MLU and the Block 52 still an amazing like ASF card, right? Every now and then I got asked, why do you say card and unit? By card I mean like how much you get for putting this single card in your deck, right? To make it extreme, right? If the difference, like this is still a good unit, right? If this was one per card on hardened, it would still be a good unit. But if you had to take 2 cards, then the card itself would be worse, right? Because to get the same number of value, you have to use twice the slots, and in this case, even 3 times the activation points. If we look at that, right? So yeah, when I say card, it takes into account like how much do you get per like slot in here, right? Like if this was 10 points and like 130 points, but only 1 per card versus 160 points and 2 per cards, then I'd say that 160 and 2 per card is a better card, even if the unit itself is just objectively worse because it costs more, right? That makes sense. Log 5 is like the Tornado RDS, but worse because it has less ECM. The Tornado RDS is 30%. It has a better turn radius and a better gun, but that's about it. Log 10 is an okay cluster bomber. It's like an okay multi-roll, but it doesn't have the ECM. Payload isn't huge, but it doesn't have to be. Honestly, I wish for it to have better ECM. That's really its biggest downside, honestly. Because then it could be like the American F-16s, right? Which, the cluster F-16s, which are like either the 100-point one, which is just affordable, or the 25.1 with A9Ms. Just decent multi-rolls. But 20% ECM for 120 points. This is like the Danish MLU, but you pay 15 points less and get 2 fewer AIM-120s, which is really annoying. You always want at least 3, essentially, for like proper ASF coverage of Fire and Forget medium range missiles. And since it doesn't have short range ones, you basically need to hit with both if you want to consistently kill a plane. Sometimes you can deal 5 damage, I think, with the gun run, but I wouldn't rely on that, right? So this is more of like a supportive plane that you're gonna send out with your other ASF. Or I guess just or I guess if the enemy plane can't really shoot back, then of course you might do that as well. Or if you're like in a very bad situation, that's basically your only option, right? It's still mainly an anti-tank plane, and it's decent at that, right? 426 AP missiles, good ECM, good speed. course, 4 missiles also means that if you want to get all of them off in one run, you're gonna dive pretty deep. So sometimes you just want to get one volley out and immediately turn, right, to survive. So keep that in mind. F-84F, cheap. Oh, non-AoE. I didn't realize that. Cheap rocket plane. Low payload as well, so you're not gonna really kill a lot of stuff consistently. Honestly, it could be like 40 points, probably, maybe. It's not that great. It's not that great. It looks well, not fancy, but funky though. NF5A, good payload for a cluster, like at that price range. Not quite the speed or ECM. I think if this was 1000 kmh, this would be very good. 750 kmh, it's fine. Honestly, if you want to run a cluster, it's honestly a good option. 3-card base, decent motor roll because aim 9, not too fast, and I think this has still a stat copy of Vulcan, by the way, rate of fire wise. Actually, kind of okay. Honestly, if this had 20% ECM, maybe even 30, but I don't want to like maybe go too far. I'd even be like just a great plane. And yeah, this exists. Once again, napalm plane. It has okay payload, but doesn't have the speed or ECM, right? That's always a story with napalm planes. They're always lacking at least one of those things, maybe with the exception of the Phantom. Phantom is like the only good napalm plane. I guess, and the checkmate if you want to count that, but that's not really the same thing, right? They always like either payload, i.e. they have ECM and speed, but only carry like 2 bombs or something. Or they lack speed, or they lack ECM. Yeah, it's always the same, and it's unfortunate, but you know, it is what it is. Either way, I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Bye bye.